Great to be here with everybody. I hope you're awake and ready to go after lunch. I know the panelists are excited to get going. We'll have plenty of time for you to ask questions if you have questions on particular topics we're going over. So just raise your hand. Ryan will be around with a mic if needed. And please feel free. We want this to have a good discussion. I think the panelists are here to help provide maybe their perspective, but also hear from the crowd as well. So first, we're going to go around and do a quick intro session of the panel. Fran, I'm going to ask you to go first.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to share thoughts on a core element of my current and past professional activity, which is CMC. So I'm currently leading the Process Engineering Center of Excellence in CSL Behring, and CMC is obviously a major responsibility of my current professional life. And as it was in other companies, like I've been doing same roles in GSK, Merck, MSD, and also Lonza. And one key thing to me is that not any of these companies is good at doing CMC. We are all equally inefficient, so that's something that we clearly need to improve. Yeah. So in the Process Engineering Center of Excellence for CSL Behring, we have a team of 55 people, scientists and engineers, that take responsibility on the CMC life cycle from R&D. So we focus on tech transfer, process validation, post-change management. And we also have a couple of teams that have process modeling and digital and data systems support, which I think is a good combination for the topic that we are talking today, because linked to our paper-based approach to tech transfer CMC, we're also missing some good opportunities on actually doing more in silico simulations and this type of things. So happy to be here and share thoughts with you.
Thanks, Fran. Joschka?
Yeah, thank you for having me. My name is Joschka Boyle. I'm the product manager at QbDVision, and I recently joined. And my background is actually in the pharma world. I was with Bayer for the last 7 years. After my study of biotechnology and my PhD in drug science, I joined Bayer in the development department, and over the year became an expert in the field of quality by design, and jumped between different roles of data science and digitalization, MSAT, and finally also QC. I was responsible for the rollout of QbDVision at Bayer and also Virogen, which is a subsidiary of Bayer in Spain, for the last 4 years, and also worked a lot on modeling, so in silico modeling, especially in the downstream area, and also on establishing standards. I was piling on that in one of my questions earlier, so that I established a taxonomy for Bayer to also start standardizing. So a lot of my interest lies in this area to standardize and harmonize what our industry is doing.
Thank you, Joschka. James?
Hi, everybody. It's a privilege to be here with you today. My name is James Maxwell, and I am a life sciences innovation lead at a place called The Dock in Dublin, if my accent hasn't already given me away. The Dock is Accenture's Global Centre for R&D and Innovation, and more specifically to this discussion, we have a variety of different teams that are focused full-time on solving for challenges across the whole life sciences value chain, many of those specific challenges being in the CMC space. What I spend my day-to-day doing is leading innovation projects and programs with global organizations, many of whom are represented here in the room, and helping people to do very early experimental work and validation of early concepts and ideas that they deem innovative for the CMC space. So delighted to be here with you and share some of my thoughts.
Thank you, James. And last but not least, Chris.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris McCurdy. I'm Chief Architect of Healthcare and Life Sciences at Amazon Web Services. I've been in this role for about 5 years. I've been in life sciences at AWS for about 9 years. And my role is to go and work with customers and leaders like yourselves to find out how our services can be better used to remove what is your undifferentiated heavy lifting, or to work with partners like those represented here as well, to figure out what solutions can be built and acquired to really move things forward and accelerate things. And I'm super excited to be here. I see manufacturing, as Fran said earlier, there's a lot of efficiency to be gained. And so I see it as a fantastic area with great potential, and very excited to be here.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, so as we start the discussion a bit, I think I heard a few notes here during the introductions, but even Fran said that nobody's doing digital CMC well, and I heard a lot of laughs and smiles in the room. So maybe I'll ask the panelists just to start a bit with giving us a highlight of maybe your own experience, challenges, frustrations, observations. This isn't much of a therapy session, but maybe we'll start a bit of a therapy session around, sharing a little bit so people and then the crowd can hear about what you've got and what's on your plate from an issue or a story, and let them lament a bit. Fran, you want to start?
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. So obviously, when thinking about challenges and frustrations on the CMC space, several come to mind, a number. But I think that the key one to me is realizing how inefficient we are with knowledge management and knowledge transfer in the biopharma space. Yeah? That to me is the key one. If you think about CMC or tech transfer from a pure operational excellence point of view, this is what they call pure waste, because it takes a lot of months. It's mostly based in manual and paper-based tasks, and it's also supported by our natural tendency in organizations to build silos, which means that the information flows from A to B to C to D based on some predefined requirements defined to build our functional castles without being available to everyone from the start. So I think to me that's the most important challenge that we have. And that is my aspiration. I love this business because obviously we are making medicines for people. So moving medicines through the complex CMC life cycle is challenging, but it's rewarding. But my aspiration is really democratizing the information from day zero. So everything is available from everyone. So all the different functions can get information from day zero, and they can incorporate that and integrate seamlessly into their downstream systems, and we accelerate the business of medicines to patients. Yeah? That's my aspiration.
Thank you, Fran. I can feel the frustration, but the want to make a difference. So let's see how we can do that. Yeah. Yashka?
So I recently joined QbDVision, not even half a year ago, and someone told me, like, if you join a small company with a high pace, right, it's a low learning environment that you're going to join, right? And when I think about it, like, I'm coming from a low learning environment. That's kind of my how I view at least the digital part of the pharma world in CMC, because in the end, we don't spend enough time there, I think, and it comes down for me to literacy, right? If people don't understand what we're doing, they can't ask for the right things, right? So for me, this is the biggest lag that we have in our industry today, that on all levels, especially I think in the middle layer of the management and then also down to the low level, people don't understand actually what the capabilities of new technology is, right? Because they don't learn how to use it, how to understand it properly. So they're not asking the right questions, and that results in that people start creating solutions where there's no use cases, no real need, right? And that's, I think, where the disconnect happens a lot, where we can get better, and we will have to get better.
We will have to get better, yes, for sure. James, as innovation topics and lead, you get problems come across your desk all the time, but what are the key things that you see kind of back to the clients of those issues? Where are you hearing the main problem points?
Yeah, my first observation when I started to get ready for this panel, when I went back through multiple projects across the last 8 or 10 years, was that the questions haven't actually fundamentally changed too much, at least through my own experience. I had written some of them down here. We had very ambitious questions asked 6, 7, 8 years ago about how might we break down knowledge silos and reduce information loss to zero? How might we reduce tech transfer time to zero? I saw 4 months on Pavel's slide earlier on. How might we author and review Section 3 in 1 week? It's not that the questions have fundamentally changed that are at least coming to our team. It's that there's different levels of nuance. The technology landscape has changed. The appreciation for needing to understand the scientists and the production technicians and all of the stakeholders behind the problem is different. But my high-level observation is, as was called out by Fran, everyone's facing similar challenges, and I think the one thing to take away from that then is that the value of community events like this and also pre-competitive spaces that we heard about earlier on. Some of the more successful initiatives that I've seen have done a fantastic job of putting a lot of time and energy into understanding the end users that sit behind the technology. And I would say that I think going back 6, 7, 8 years, CMC as a innovation topic was few and far between, and we've just seen an exponential rise of organizations coming to tackle these challenges, probably indicative of the context that was outlined at the beginning.
Okay. Thanks, James. And Chris, you had a bit of a different perspective as maybe a AWS vendor coming in. Mm-hmm. What are the things that you're seeing as industry challenge in your role as architect and hearing from the business challenges? But I'm sure things are challenging in your neck of the woods as well.
Yeah, I mean, I will plus one some of the sentiments from earlier, but one that really is unfortunate is what was called out earlier with the pilot purgatory or the demo purgatory. There's a lot of really talented people doing really talented things across the industry, and these are getting lost or they're not able to develop due to business constraints or budgeting or there's a myriad of reasons as to why they can't go forward. So figuring that out, helping them, enabling them, positioning them well so that they can deliver those. We'll use the talent that exists within all the pharma already and help elevate people. And the other thing, just to go for extra credit on this one, is and I know there was a bunch of conversation earlier about it, but the still reliance on documentation. Moving from documentation to knowledge or knowledge to something that's actually mineable and has analytics and is useful downstream. We've been having this conversation for a very long time, but I do think we're at an inflection point with generative AI, with the tooling, the compute power, the storage power, to where we can actually change that now. So I'm looking forward to that, but it is a point of frustration.
Okay, great. Now I think we've heard from the frustrations. I'm sure some of you can relate to some of those frustrations. I'm sure there's more out there. We can't get the session to go too long on just a round table, but why don't we look into a bit of the topics we're going to talk about. So I think first thing, overall we want to look at how are we making positive change towards digitization, process, and products for the CMC space. So Fran, I'm going to come to you first around thinking about the complexities of CMC. Obviously new science and new types of therapies, modalities are delivering really remarkable healthcare outcomes to patients. And the benefits we're seeing are great. But we often hear that medicines, especially biologics, are becoming increasingly complex to develop and manufacture even at that case. So how do we see this increasing complexity manifest in the CMC space and process development area?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And there are, I think, many factors in my mind that bring this complexity. You mentioned one of them, which is obviously we have a lot of new modalities in the market. Yeah? So who was thinking about mRNA 5 years ago? Yeah? We now have cell therapies, gene therapies that people tend to think is just one modality, but it's really a library of modalities. Yeah? So with different complexity. And clearly, in many cases, the regulatory pathways and even the industry knowledge is not there. So many companies are navigating uncharted territories on these things. I think linked to this, there is another element that adds to the complexity, which I think with the explosion of biological knowledge that we are seeing, and we will see more and more. We see a lot of small labs coming with promising molecules or small entrepreneurs that they don't have CMC capabilities, yeah? But they have things that might work on the clinic. So they do the initial stages, and then hopefully at some point a big company ends buying the molecule, and they need to fill those gaps. Because traditionally in the past, I think biopharmas, especially big biopharmas, tend to own more the whole life cycle. That's not happening anymore. Yeah? And it's not only on the initial stages, is also on the whole CMC chain, because now you might have a product that cell line development is done in this company, formulation development is done in that company, analytical development is done here or there, process development is done here, drug substance manufacturing is done in a CMO or in a different company, and drug product manufacturing is done in a different company too, and packaging and many other things. So actually, when you are going to file, you need to build a coherent story that combines all these different elements. And each one of these companies have different systems, different processes, different policies. So it's never easy to assemble that story. That's something that's really impacting. I mentioned two elements of the complexity in my previous comment. Paper-based process, very manual. Clearly prone to errors. Why do we make so much errors when we start running batches after the tech transfer? Because clearly we make errors in the flow of information. The siloed approach that we have in biopharma, I think, is an important element. Everyone is waiting, give me the information I need, rather than actually working collaboratively to make it happen. And there are a couple of additional things that come to mind in terms of complexity. One is the need for speed. That's the mantra. We all are used to the concept of file fast and fix later. We want to have the drug approved, and then we will deal with all the post-approval challenges. So I still remember one sentence from one of the leaders I had that she said, we sacrifice to the god of the speed all the other gods, the consistency, the accuracy, the robustness, and that's a reality in the biopharma space now. And linked to this, and I don't want that anyone in quality here might be offended, we have probably the most complicated and less efficient quality system in the biopharma space is the change control. So we have very complicated change control processes across all companies, and that really makes, for a worldwide file drug, makes it really complicated.
Yeah, lots of complexity. Obviously, the silos and the lack of collaboration, communication makes it super tough. So appreciate that. Any follow-up questions from the audience? Feel free to just raise your hand. We'll get you a mic, or even commentary, or anybody from the panel want to comment on where that was? Yeah,
I would directly go to that. Like, how can you elaborate a little bit? What for you is the pain point in the change management system today? Like the biggest one.
So the key problem I see is that change management, is built to actually avoid changes. That is the reality. So it's really. It's a roadblock to innovation and actually improving the process, improving the molecule, and that's a benefit for patients. But if you really want to do a change in a process, you file a massive amount of bureaucracy that really discourages people from doing changes. And obviously, linked to this, we have a lot of, and we know that some regulatory agencies are more special than others. And there is disparity on the different regulations across the world, which also complicates things. But the reality is that it's such a complicated process that is built to actually prevent changes from happening. And I think that's a roadblock to innovation.
So you're saying we need to reduce complexity? Is that what you think we need?
I think we need to reduce complexity and make it easier for people, actually making sure that we can drive improvements in the process. And that needs to be, I think, needs to go in parallel with some more harmonization across the regulatory authorities. They are working on that, but we are not yet there by far.
Yeah, so some key challenges, and even the change process, understanding and identifying when you find a problem, what to change, where to change, right? It's all paper-based. You could spend weeks trying to figure out where is the actual problem, and okay, now I've identified it, but what all do I have to change to make that change effective? And to get it approved. And again, back to the silos piece, it's multiple teams oftentimes, right?
Yeah, and I think one tendency, something that all companies do is we have a change, whatever change. And typically the person that's managing the change, they have a list of individuals or groups that really need to assess the change. And typically an assessment goes to maybe 20 different individuals. Many of them don't have anything to deal with the change. But the default position is, let's send to everyone. So we are covered and we have the opinion from everyone. And that's not really good.
Yeah, it makes it insanely long, right, the process, and also takes resources from where...
Everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere.
Really everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And waste of time in some cases.
Waste of time, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
And many assessors don't even understand the change, I'm pretty sure. You are working, I don't know, in maintenance, probably you don't understand the impact of changing whatever ranges in the bioreactor.
Yeah. Well.
All right, well, thanks for that, Fran. Yashka, I'm going to come to you when we think about the future of digital CMC. So each year, Accenture does interviews of several of the life science CEOs, what their priorities are for the coming year. In 2024, for the first time, we actually heard priorities around harnessing technology, which is a key piece, right? That was their number one, with CEOs emphasizing that they'll spend significantly more time and emerging technology to create value in R&D, which is great, right? Great for us all in the room, right? We want the budget to spend and the limelight. But without mentioning GenAI, this is going to be tricky. Where do you see technology have the greatest impact and value in development in CMC space?
Okay, I'm going to pile a little bit on the harness.
Yeah.
Right? For me, like harness means, okay, I want to control something and use it, right? And my intro was saying, yeah, okay, I think we have a literacy problem, right? So people don't know how to use it. I think that's the first piece for me that we need to solve, right? So leaders understand apparently now that we need time, right? You said that. I think that's great, right? That's for me the first step to getting somewhere, because I think we heard it this morning as well here and there, that usually companies assume that digitalization happens on the side, kind of, right? So there's no dedicated resources, or just for short time frames. I heard like you get money for 6 months, then you're going to be broke after that if you're unlucky, right? So you don't have security also to build something that takes more than 6 months, right? And you never know if you can continue after a POC, and it's maybe also the reason why many of them fail, right? Or end after the POC, or endless POC mode, whatever. We heard that from Pavel this morning. So I think that's the first piece, right? We need to educate our industry to better deal with this stuff, and then, okay, if we get more time and more resources to do it well, right, to do it right, then we have a chance to be successful, I think. And then, okay, coming to the second part of your questions, and please, everyone in the audience, just chime in, right? So, I think for me, there's two areas where technology can help the CMC space, right? So the first, and I think we heard it here and there today already, right? And I can only repeat what was in the presentations, but the first is there's a lot of historical knowledge in companies, right? Not for the new modalities maybe, but there's definitely modalities that we know how to make them, or we think we know how to make them, right? And there's knowledge lying around there in PDFs and other formats that are not accessible, right? And I think here lies a big chance. And what I've seen so far is that some companies manage to make this a digital data set, but most of them have not, right? So there's still a big chance if we go then to modeling, right? We heard modeling today, like what do you base your models on, right? Is it per project? No, right? It's per modality, and you want to build models that can support any new antibody that you're making, right? Any new mRNA that you're making. And you're only going to get there if you have the data available to build the models on, right? So that's, for me, the first big piece I think that everyone needs to work on more, right? It's underestimated still, I think. Companies still think they have the knowledge, but it resides with people. And that's for me the second bigger problem, right? Is when we go to the tech transfer topic of this whole day here, right? It's the tacit knowledge that exists, right? And sometimes we think tacit or implicit knowledge is something that I cannot write down, right? But I think we write down a lot of information, especially when it comes to tech transfer, but it's hidden in text as well, right? So it's also not explicit enough to be really consumable by someone else, right? Because the language that we're using is not explicit enough, right? And that's, sorry to say, but AI could help there at some point, but the other big piece, and we heard it again already this morning from Mike, is standardization, right? So how do I make sure if I call something bioreactor, someone somewhere else, is now an easy example, of course, understands that I'm meaning bioreactor as well, and not fermenter or whatever, right? So that's the second part of it, I guess, is the standardization, harmonization piece of it, so that people really understand what someone else means, right? And that's for me a chance that even with no complete standard, we can get somewhere where we can understand each other better, right? Maybe with the help of AI, bridging the gaps a little bit here and there, right? But in general, enable that. and then, but at the same time, also not box the people too much into, I mean, like, you have to write it like this, right? Because that also doesn't work, right? So that's also from my experience in the past, is that if you say, this is how you call things, and people don't like it, they will not do it, right? And I think scientists are, as a scientist, you want to have a certain degree of freedom, right? You're used to that. You want to be, explorative and stuff. So it's very difficult to put a scientist in a box, right? I think you always say it like that. And so there needs to be a middle ground here in terms of like how much do you want to control someone versus like what level of freedom you give someone to actually work.
Yeah, so maybe if there's no questions in the crowd, a follow-up to any of the panelists. I mean, I heard talking to a few people around, you know, how do I get started? How do I get budget? How do I get my VP or my CEO or my C-level excited for this?
Yeah.
Right? Because obviously they need to give me budget. Great to hear that my CEO said, I want to harness technology and we need to figure this out for it. But how do I get their attention so that we're harnessing CMC area and helping out this space? So how do you approach, you know, I guess the education? Because a lot of the C-level maybe don't come from the CMC space. They don't come from a laboratory. They don't understand. So how do you get that excitement? What's the strategy that you've taken to get maybe a business case drawn up, or to start having those high-level conversations to get them educated? Anybody?
Well, you know, I think that clearly timelines is a key element, a key part of the business case, because you know if you are able to accelerate the CMC timelines, clearly leaders understand that. The second key element, I think, is about you know, all the companies are concerned about deviations. Yeah? So if we are able to say we really do a good knowledge management, knowledge transfer, you will see less deviations when you are running the process. Because we all know that first batches of a new tech transfer, we always have more deviations. Yeah? So I think, to me, those would be the two key elements to support the business case. And clearly, we should need less people. You know, actually, we are really doing a good job with Digital CMC to actually manage information from here to there. I think in some companies, some people think that, you know, going back to your example on documents, yeah? Yes, you know, all companies have document management systems, and you know, and some people think, you know, we already have this digital. No, that's not the real digital knowledge repository, yeah? Because if you are searching for a product name, you probably will get 1,500 documents, and you don't know which document is the one that you need. Yeah? Yeah. So having a digital repository of documentation is not a digital knowledge system.
That's the implicit part that I was mentioning, right, for written text, even though it's explicit per se, but yeah.
Paper on glass.
Paper on glass.
Digitization. It's maybe a step closer than just the paper itself, but it's not digitization. Yeah.
Yeah, as long as it's not fully fair, right? Like we heard that phrase as well. Like if you can't find it, it's as if it was not there, right? Yeah. So if you're stranded in a document management system with 1,500 results of something, right? It's probably not very efficient to get what you were looking for. Yeah.
So if I can add one thing on to I agree 100% with what you said, Fran, but I think it's also critical as part of the business case to define what's your kind of flywheel of value to where you can start delivering value within the next 3 to 6 months. It doesn't have to be a huge amount of value, but it shows something that's going to production, it's releasing, it's tangible. How are you going to build on that top of that 3 months later, 3 months later? If you can build that flywheel, keep it accelerating, keep it going, you're much more likely to get acceptance by the business case opposed to in 2 years, what was it earlier? In 2 years, you might get a PDF. That's not going to fly in today's model whatsoever.
Can I respond to that? What you see a lot is that there's a lot of planning before something actually happens, right? So people don't really do these short cycles with value, but they rather plan a lot. They try to consider all different possibilities. And I have to say, like, it's super German as well. I am a German, right? So to be like that, right? Yeah. And I think there needs to be a mind change how you approach these technologies, because it also doesn't fit how software is developed today, right? So like the turnover of software and I can say that as a product manager, right, is fast, right? So you need to adopt fast. If you plan for 2 years, you're not going to be successful, right? You will go out of sync with what's happening in a software versus what's happening in your organization when you use the software, right? So there needs to be an adoption here to AD.
We're seeing the ops methodology kind of cascade over.
Yeah.
It's going to be a long process, but I agree 100%. But cool.
Yeah. Questions? Yep. Our question champion.
Okay, so just wanted to react on that because this is a debate I'm having internally as well. I think one of the main issues we're having is the pharmaceutical development is waterfall.
Yeah.
Whereas the software development is agile now, and we are moving to a productized approach. And I think there is a cultural battle to do there. Because the pharmaceutical development will have to remain waterfall in a way because you have a very fixed set of quality parameters that you need to reach at the end and a specific time point and the clinical data and everything. But we should ideally change our way of working to manage that in a much more productized way. But it's super difficult because culturally people are too much on this waterfall mode.
So it needs to be a mix. Is that what you're saying in the end?
Right. And I think a bit, maybe a quick follow-on to that. I think a bit of what we see is clients are still looking at, or companies that I want to do a program, and a program has a start and a finish, which is kind of how you got here, right? We put a program in, a piece of software was put in 15 years ago. It's still kind of there, but nobody uses it anymore. But we haven't put any money into it, right? So it's not a program. It needs to be an ongoing initiative. Thus, the 3 to 6 months, you get value, you figure out what the next value piece is, because technology is going faster than any of us can. And if we don't start doing the everlasting program, not to say you have to spend millions and millions, but you're spending millions and millions just on paper a year. So, let's shift that fund. Yeah, question?
Yes. It's about the document.
Yeah.
Because now in the industry we are document-centric. So when you say document management systems are not that well organized in industry, I disagree a bit with that because there are plenty of people working on that. So from all the source report or the dossier, so it's well organized. But let's say the data is now in the document. So how do we transition from the data in the document to the data that's accessible and viewable by everybody?
So I'll say what I'm seeing is two things, and it's going to have to be a cycle for many, many years probably, which is the source of record is not the document, it's the data that supports the document. So documents can be generated based on the data. So if you can get to that, then you're in good state. The reality, though, is there's a whole legacy of document-based culture. And so then there's the other side of that, of taking and codifying those documents into data that can then be stored, be queried, and used downstream. And so folks are kind of building that cycle, and they're using the thing that we're not going to talk about till later to try and help and accelerate that and try and move that forward.
Yeah, and maybe Yashka and Fran, you can come in, but I think when they were saying the document management system is tough, I think it's managed and we understand what the documents are, but we're trying to get at data inside the documents, to your point, right? I don't think that we were saying that the document management system isn't well organized and we know what a document is. We just can't get to the data in the document, right? When I search for a piece of data, I'm getting 1,000 records because they all have something similar, right? I think that's the key point. Okay. Well, that's okay. Yeah. He's gonna do a follow up real quick. Did I summarize that right, Fran, Yashka?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So there is, for example, at UBCB we use Viva as documentation management system, and you have all metadata, all rules to retrieve this documentation. So to somehow it's structured. So take it easy when you talk about document, because people at school learn how to write, learn how to basically do documents, and when they work, when they do work, they just do the same. So, and they not born just as IT guys, but as you were saying, the knowledge used to make those documents should be used to make the systems.
Yep. We're gonna come over here. We'll come back to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to share another personal experience when it comes to how we get the buy-in from management and all the stakeholders. we talked about, or you talked about, we should set clear timelines, like 6-month outcome. Same approach that we heard in our keynote presentation today. My personal experience, though, is it is very difficult because with those IT solutions or digital solutions, everything is connected, and it's like you start with A, and at the end it's E. So A, B, C, D, E, but E is then again connected with A, so you cannot just work on A without having already the end in mind, and that makes it so very difficult. And it's I'm not coming up with a solution; it's just a concern and just sharing of experiences to break that down into good pieces to get forward. Because I always am overwhelmed by the interconnectivity of all the modules that we have to consider from end to end. And that's just my personal experience. And I'm still looking for solutions, how to break that down, because it's very individual for every other company. And yeah, it's a big task. Yeah.
Any response?
Can I say something on this? I think one element we need to think also, because believe me, the biopharma industry has not been shy investing in digital. Yeah? If you look at all the companies, I'm pretty sure that they're having a significant amount of millions from the big companies investing in digital. Yeah? And clearly, we have not been successful in actually making good use of that investment. Yeah? So one element that we all need to consider is that senior leaders know that. Yes, I've been investing millions. Everyone that comes to my door tells me that this is the last wonder of the world and this will fix everything. And, a new thing is coming, yeah? Because we have silos in the organization and different people might have different aspirations. I'm pretty sure that for those that work on companies, probably you have 3 different statistical packages in the company. You have 4, 5, 6, 7 different reporting systems because that's the reality. We go there, we ask for 500,000 or whatever, we build something, and then another one comes and do the same. Yeah? So we don't have that culture either, yeah? And that's a problem too.
And before we get to you, I think one thing, you think about those big, long projects, there's a reason the 3 to 6 months is good because the business changes so fast as well, right? Things, new modalities coming in, so if you put a 2-year project in, there's a chance the business is changing before the project even gets implemented, right? So you got to find those smaller chunks to get value out of, and that way you can adjust as you keep going versus a large, long project that, and oftentimes we talk to people about, you're on paper today or you're doing something process based on the current low tech you have today. When you start to use the baseline of a system, your perspective changes, your issues change, your problems will change dramatically. Things that you think are problems today won't be tomorrow just by using the out-of-box part of a piece of technology. Right? So you got to be careful that, you're trying to put requirements in for all the problems you have today, but some of those won't be problems tomorrow.
Vanish.
Okay, so just on the document part and information, it's a debate we had a lot in the ICH as well for the restructuring of the Module 3. What you want to get to is an information, and the problem is the granularity. So yes, it's well structured up to the stability section of your dossier, and you have metadata, but that's not what you're interested in. You want the shelf life and the storage condition. Where is this? And you always need to open the document. There are 40 pages, and somewhere is your shelf life. That's the next level that we need to do now. We need to structure all of the information that is within these documents, that every piece is super precise with this metadata context, and then you could do AI and all of this nice stuff and everything. At the moment, we only structure to very big blocks where there is tons of things inside, and we all organize across company very differently, and I can tell you regulators complain about that, because we all write the stability section differently. It's never at the same place.
Yeah, thanks for that. We got a question. Welcome to the room back row. All right.
Thanks. I'm another English optimist, or optimistic Englishman. Yeah, we're a dying breed, I think. I really like the idea, the way you talked about having certain aspects of your programs delivered as continual initiatives rather than projects. And that's something I think could be really impactful. My only worry there is how do you ensure that these initiatives continue when the management changes? Because I've been in and around this industry for many years. Some of us have got grey hairs or no hair. Yeah. That we used to deal with the same person for like 15 years, and they were responsible for transformation over extended periods of time. The world as it is now is we don't see the same person maybe year to year. 3 years is someone in that position of high enough up that they can say, right, this initiative needs to run for a serious amount of time. They're few and far between. So how do we enable that program to continue despite the change in personnel?
My opinion there, if you are actually able to show the value, some value soon, and you actually have some users that are actually, especially if those are people that are close to the manufacturing process, that will be able to support you when you are asking for money, that will be great. So rather, because what will happen is we tend to build long strategies, 3-5 years now. I still remember the times where you are writing an URS, 80 pages. Which system in the world is going to meet all these requirements? No one. We try to do the perfect thing from the beginning. But if you are actually able to say, in 6 months, manufacturing has seen a decrease in deviations or has seen a decrease in the document management time, and the manufacturing people is actually able to support you on that, you will get the funding.
That's if they know, sorry. That's if they know manufacturing or your domain. What happens when you get someone who doesn't know?
Sorry,
Doesn't know the domain.
What happens when someone comes in who doesn't know your domain, or someone in IT that's saying, why did you buy that? You should have this. And you go back and you redo the same thing again. So I get the idea when they know the domain, but it's another fact of life that those people often...
No, that is correct. And clearly, we always have debates between IT, and we are siloed organizations and everyone has different strategies. But to me, the key engagement point, especially in manufacturing organizations, is when manufacturing sees the value. That's the strongest voice to me to actually support the case.
Yeah, it's too many times we do a business case. That's the first time we go out and see how long things take, and then we implement a program or we start working on it, but we don't check again, right? So if you really make those programs value-driven and check the value along the way, it should be easy for you to pull up and say, here's the value we've already delivered, and here's the value we're going to deliver in the next 3 or 4 iterations, right?
Yeah, you should certainly have stakeholders you can lean on who can help in that conversation and help educate if you're delivering that value. And the other side of that is kind of worse, right? So if you're on a 2-year project and you haven't delivered anything and the new manager comes in, they're going to come in and say what's working, what's not, and you're going to be top of the something I need to do about list. So,
great. Another back row alumni. Okay, Mike.
So, just a connected thought here, Jeremy, and it's going back to you and the premise, I think, for this section was the Accenture report of CEOs saying that hello? Oh, there we go.
There you go.
The Accenture report from CEO interviews that technology is on the agenda. And I sort of connect that to the percentage of pointless or failed POCs. In the, is there an education training opportunity both at the management level as well as the end user level to actually better articulate business cases and not have conversations at all about technology, inverted commas, because they're almost creating the problem by saying they're putting technology on the agenda. Who cares? Mm-hmm. I've still got to solve a business problem. And, I sort of go to James, knowing James's world inside out. Every single innovation engagement, James, that you can talk about spends the first 2 days helping the client articulate the business problem they actually want to articulate. So isn't there a need in this industry to actually train people to better articulate business problems and get off this whole technology thing? Full stop.
I'm up. As if it was planned, Mike, Really quickly about me for context in this, my own background is design, research, anthropology, behavioral science. It wasn't originally life sciences. This domain came to me and I stuck with it then for many, many, many years. Based on that and based on what was already established this morning about how technology is not the answer, it's an accelerant, I think was the language used this morning. I wholeheartedly agree. The first project that I ever did in the CMC domain was with Mike. And as a person who comes at things from a user design perspective and understanding the people behind the technology, I was astounded first and foremost by the complexity of processes and systems and people and roles that exist across the whole CMC domain. And if you look at things purely through a tech lens, you start to look at things in terms of ELNs and MES systems and everything else. But behind all those systems, there's people. Behind your ELN, there's the developmental scientist that thinks in a certain way, behaves in a certain way, and works in a certain way. Your MES and your production technicians, your RIM and your dossier authors and strategists, and the list goes on. I think to Mike's point, when we follow an innovation process, we do so by helping people both on the ground. We look for what we call collaborative advantage at different levels. We look for collaborative advantage with people who are on the ground, who need to be able to communicate the business case, but also need to be a part of the change. That's also linked to what you were talking about, Joschka, about how, to paraphrase, you're talking earlier about change not being a push but a pull. I can't tell the scientists how to work, but if I include them in the process, then maybe they'd be more open to the change that happens. So on the ground with those kinds of stakeholders is about having the right feedback loops, getting different types of stakeholders involved in an agile way, to whoever was talking about that a while ago, and forming the right teams around it. And to Mike's point, helping people even on the lowest levels of your company articulate the business case and the value that they need to deliver. The next level of collaborative advantage that I'd think of for this, and it's been mentioned a good few times today, is cross-functional. Fran did an amazing job of teeing up all of the different scenarios that can play out for different organizations and even external organizations owning different parts of the CMC process. But really the most successful initiatives that I've seen on our side is ones whereby they had co-investment and co-sponsorship from both research and manufacturing and the different divisions involved. I fully appreciate that I made that sound easy. It's not at all, but I think those are the ones whereby you have change from both sides, and co-investment has really helped with driving that change. Someone else earlier on, I think it might have been Pavel, mentioned about how, you know, it's important to avoid, I think it was called closed loop processes in terms of how you develop or change or digitize for your CMC. And I think it was referenced in the context of business not including IT or IT with business, but not to forget the scientist as well. There's an intricate Venn diagram that needs to be put together there of people who are going to collaborate around your ongoing initiative if you really want people to be bought in and change to be a pull rather than a push. And then the last kind of level we think on is partnership, and there's no better example of that than actually us being here today. I've had multiple organizations across the last few years ask about whether there is pre-competitive organizations to be able to join that are also tackling similar challenges. I've never had a really good answer to that specifically for this domain, but now hopefully with Project Artemis we might. But I think that collaboration, it gets spread out across your contract organizations, it's across your vendors, it's across your partnerships. And the one thing that I'd mention about partnership, because it's top of mind for me on a couple of my programs currently, is that there's an actual mindset shift for some organizations as well to move from, and this is probably not perfectly phrased, but a vendor mindset to a partnership mindset. CMC is complex, therefore there is no silver bullet answer is what we're saying here today, and therefore it requires a collaborative approach and a partnership mindset. What's the difference? It's less transactional and it's more about creative friction and being able to work through things and problem change things together. That was a lot there, but maybe it makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, question? Yeah.
Yeah, it just goes back to the technical literacy question. So the Viva Vault that he brought up earlier just brought this to mind. So I've worked in companies where metadata was mandatory for Viva Vault, and picking up the document you need is easy. I've worked in companies where metadata was not a requirement for Viva Vault, and finding anything was an absolute nightmare. How do we ensure that the technologies that we're implementing, say with the QbDVision side, has a standard approach to use where it's leveled across all the companies it's in, let's say in our Lily network? So how do we ensure the QbDVision software is used to its full capability by people who may not be technically literate in that space?
That's to me, probably.
Yashka. Everybody's staring at you, including me. Yeah.
Yes, I think it has multiple aspects to it, right? So it's like, how do these systems work together in the future, right? So that's one. Is it ingesting information from each other, or is it pointing to each other, right? So that's what's the right way to do that? How to integrate information on the long run, right? How to make sure you find the right information, right? So that goes maybe back to like contextualizing information beyond the metadata that you have in Viva Vault, for example, right? So that's maybe also to your point, right? How do we get beyond the metadata for the document, right? Like, what's in the document, right? So do you have ways to represent this, right? And that's definitely, when you use our system, you have that chance, because we have explicit information in there that can represent, or that can generate the document that you have in Viva Vault, but you have the structured data there, and you can point to that document so that you know, okay, this information is represented in the system. Right, so actually you have a better chance now to find the information that you're actually looking for, because you have structured data or atomized data that is then findable, accessible, and so on, without silos, right? Like, I don't know how it is for you, but does everyone at Lilly have access to Viva Vault and to all the modules of it to find all the documents? That's it, right? I've even seen. Yeah. That's it, right? It's not accessible, right? That's the key point here. Even within one company, you could have 2 Viva Vaults, right? Like, now going away from a vendor, you have document management system, right? That is not accessible at all, because another side uses another system, and then, yeah, as you say, you're writing emails to people to get a document. That's exactly not what you want, and then you can also not find it, right? So there's initiatives, of course, to harmonize all that, right? But as long as we're not there, systems that really have the structured data, I think, is the ultimate solution to that, right? Instead of pointing to a document.
Yeah, so maybe to your question, and Joshka, and then maybe tying all the way back to Mike and James, I mean, I would say get some help, right? I mean, people that do this, maybe help first to talk about your problems, and then help with your business case, and to make sure you're putting in industry standard. I mean, you got companies that have done this a lot, right? Whether it's QbDVision, whether it's consulting firms like Accenture, get some support, right? We can help with, here's what we're hearing in the industry, here's what we're seeing across areas, here's use cases that will bring value, here's taxonomies that you can utilize, that here's the lessons learned when they did it wrong, right? Some of you have those, right? But how do you do it right? Right, I think that's a good question. So get some support.
Yeah, maybe one quick comment from me. I think we need to be open on the mindset, because what happens typically is we try to find systems that actually replicate our SOP. Yeah? So that do exactly what we are doing now, but digitally. Yeah? So that doesn't work. So be open to have a different view on how you actually do your processes.
I will take one more question. I think we got last topic, and then we'll wrap up. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Really good discussions. I guess a question I have for the panel is about the kind of organizational silos. We all recognize we need to digitize our data, but also do it in a structured manner. Mm-hmm. What I'm seeing is I'm getting a lot of support for that at the highest level. They want to go on this journey, they recognize it. I don't think they necessarily understand exactly what needs to be done, but that's fine, they'll get educated in time. But one thing I'm not getting support at that highest level is about, I think it came up this morning with Luke or someone, that because we have this organizational silo structure, we ultimately have siloed data systems and data, domains. For me, that's what we need to do to transform. We need to figure out how we're going to address that. And I'm not seeing a recognition at that at the highest level of management in companies, that they want to kind of come together and act as one unit. They still operate as individual units. So for me, that's what we need to do for transformation to succeed. And I don't know, have you any thoughts on that one, or how you would tackle that one?
Well, I will just share my personal reflection. And I've been in situations where I've been said, no, you don't have money to do this. fine. And you actually think how that can happen because it's so clear in my mind. Yeah? But the reality is that how I take that question is probably we need to do a better effort educating our management. Yeah? And I think that's something that we take it for granted. You know, we know that this will be great, this will solve these things or that things, but that's not clear in senior leadership mindset. Yeah? And we don't invest enough time in actually educating them on that. So I take this as a personal challenge now, actually spending more time educating senior management why things are important.
Go ahead, Jessica.
Yeah, what I've seen is also that leaders are competing for resources or money, right? And that also makes them more protective of their information that somehow justifies their department to exist, right? Let's say they have their domain, let's say a QC department owns the LLMs system, right? So that's their justification for existence to some degree, right? So, but why do we have departments at all, right? I mean, that's for me the biggest question here. Why do we need that, right? So we heard now a lot of the agile ideas here in the room, right? And ultimately, right, we need groups that are capable of delivering something, and they're multidisciplinary, right? You said that, so they don't belong to a department anymore, right? So they're experts in some field, right? That to deliver a product, right? So for me, it's more a matter of like, okay, do we need these old concepts? Can we just, is the silo just collapsing when we take away the departments? Is that maybe a way? Just a thought.
Yeah, I just, so on one hand, I say if you put on the hat of the executives, if they've been in role for 10 years or however long, they probably have been burned by a data strategy or data strategy initiative where they've lost, or millions of dollars have not resulted in anything productive. And so as soon as this comes up, they immediately pull back. And so this is where I completely agree with Joshua. Creating something small bite-sized chunks where you can start sharing it amongst folks. This is where like the data as a product style approach comes into play, where people can have their data products, they have their data, they can share it, they can put it in a catalog, it can be findable, it can have the metadata, it can be shared across the enterprise. If you can find 2 or 3 groups who start collaborating on that, more people are going to want to collaborate, they're going to be part of it, and you can start building up to have that top-down strategic initiative where someone's going to say, that has potential, I want to invest in that. So that's where we're seeing the most success there.
Mm-hmm. So Chris, while you're talking, because I don't think we can get out of the panel discussion without hitting GenAI. I feel like that's on everybody's mind. So if we're looking at large language models, big data, using tech, obviously GenAI, to help tame the complexity. You talked about this a little bit, right? To tame the complexity and the data deluge that we have out there. In the spirit of sharing, can you suggest 1, maybe 2 or more killer use cases that these guys can take back and think about of where they see the impact of GenAI in the development and CMC space?
Yeah, so I'm going to take this in a weird direction, so redirect me if I go steer too far off course, if I hallucinate, I guess. First off, we had that stat earlier, and I'm going to abuse that stat, which was 30% of the audience, or of this surveyed folks, thought that GenAI would have a minimal impact. 70% said it would have a major impact. I didn't see anyone who held their hands down. So really what we're talking about is a measure of impact. Everyone says it's going to have some. The question is how much? I'm firmly on the camp of it's going to have a major impact. And the data points that I'll kind of drive here, first, if you look on the science side, I mean, everyone kind of knows of AlphaFold, but evolutionary scale with ESM3, they just designed they generated a green fluorescent protein that shares only 57% of similarities with its nearest peer. So this is basically a novel protein that was designed by generative AI. So that's pretty cool. If you move over into the data space, we're talking data earlier. Metadata is a really interesting one. There's a lot of activity going on right now and workloads that are going into production using generative AI to go and take existing data sets, nomenclature for a company, point them at new data sets that do not have the metadata associated with them, and generate out what do all the columns and attributes mean, what's the summary of this table, and what are the likely use cases for this table based on the history of it. So now all of a sudden you now have these what were otherwise unfindable data sets, which now can be tied in and found with search engines and things like that. Then you get that kind of building even further. Actually, let's put a demarcation point here for a second. I'm going to jump back to this point later. But then you can build on that a little further, and you start seeing into the evolution of things like semantics. So we were talking earlier, what does a bioreactor mean? I did a search earlier, actually several weeks ago, on emergency stop buttons, and I immediately found about 5 or 6 different protocol names, or as it transmitted. The actual definition on whether or not the button was pressed or not, the attribute value was everything from 1, 0, true, false, on, off, and whether true or false, what that actually meant varied in between. So creating these semantic understanding. What do you actually care? Emergency stop button. That's all I care. I don't care about these details. I care if it's on or off. So building these semantic layers on top. So taking this data, building an ontology on top of it. People are using generative AIs to extract those ontologies or build schemas from ontologies, so bidirectional on the data space. So you're seeing a lot of evolution on the data world, just on enrichment, and then you can take this out to generation. I mean, I think everyone here is starting to see like SOPs that are automatically being generated, like the conversation we were having earlier. Submission documents also being generated so they can be submitted. So that's all kind of going on, and it's just kind of progressing to where ideally sometime in the future we'll have full-on semantic search where you can ask your question, you have a knowledge graph where all your attributes are tied together, it can find that data, pull it all, get your analysis back in front of you. That's the pipe dream that we will get to. The question in my mind, is that 2 years away or is that 10 years away? It's not, is that 30 years away? So kind of back to the measure of time. So kind of jumping back to that demarcation point there of data, because data is key. The other thing that's happening that I think is super exciting is agentic systems. And so that's basically, if you think of like the large LLMs that you might use on your phone and stuff, generally they have large data sets that they've all pulled together and they refresh it every so often based on culling the data. The agentic systems, they're able to call out to various APIs and get real-time data from real-time systems or pull in real-time data from real-time systems. And so we're seeing with these agentic systems where people are building targeted LLMs, so very specific LLMs for doing specific things, building out the tools so these agents can query internal systems to get to what the real-time data is, and then start to be able to create chatbots or let's say natural language interfaces. So you can go and ask a question, it traverses those sites, it creates a theory as to what your answer is, coalesces it and summarizes it with references going back to you. So all of a sudden you're now combined internal data, external data, with kind of knowledge bases all in one nice location, making it all accessible for you right then and there. So it's a very, very exciting time. And one thing, just to prove that GenAI will have an impact for you, I did a search earlier, and being we all have lavaliers, I asked it, what would our band name from the 90s be? And I got 2 suggestions here. One was Batch Control. The other one was Titration Nation. So
love it.
If anyone has any better suggestions, please let us know. But now generative AI has impacted all of you.
Well, thank you for that, Chris. I'm sure there's loads of questions. I think we've got to move on to the next topic, but appreciate the panelists. Let's give a hand for Titration Nation. Maybe from the panelist side, why don't we give a hand to the audience for some good, detailed questions back to us, and thank you for sitting in the hot seat. Thank you, audience. Give it up.